Good day, and welcome back to another marvelous video. Today, we're going to dive right into Season 2, Episode 4 of The Rings of Power. To recap the last episode, Elrond was given command of the company and tasked to warn Celebrimbor of Halbrand's true identity, but it was a little too late for that as we got our first glimpse at Anatar, the Lord of the Gifts, in Episode 2. Across the sea, Queen Regent Midiel's coronation was a disaster, to say the least, with Ar-Pharazôn sneaking his way toward Númenor's throne. The latest episode, titled Eldest, gave us a beloved character on screen for the first time in Tolkien history. Be wary of spoilers ahead as we talk about it all. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Galadriel's foresight. The episode began with a company led by Elrond making haste from Lindon to Eregion to warn Celebrimbor. A map marking their journey showed us the Baranduin River, which came to be known as the Brandywine River by the hobbits, who considered it a boundary between the known and the unknown. This episode spent much of its time focusing on the hobbits' ancestors, whom we'll talk about in a minute. The Brandywine River flowed out of Lake Evendeem. The country surrounding this lake was significant because Galadriel and her husband Celeborn were said to have lived there before moving to Eregion after the War of Wrath. Also, following the fall of Númenor, Elendil would establish the capital of Arnor on the southern shore of this lake. There seemed to be palpable tension between Elrond and Galadriel in this episode. Clearly, Elrond hadn't fully forgiven Galadriel for what she'd done, and of course was wary of the Ring of Power on her finger. Tolkien stated in one of his many letters that the Rings of Power enhanced its wearer's innate abilities. In his universe, Elrond was most well known for his foresight, and so was Galadriel. Her ring, Nenya, was said to have the powers of protection, preservation, and concealment from evil. Along with this, she could also foretell what would come to pass. In a moment of choosing another path as the main one was destroyed, Galadriel saw a glimpse of Barrow-wights, creatures of the night that they soon encountered. This was because Elrond refused to take counsel from a ring, understandably so. Commander Elrond, Lieutenant Galadriel, and the rest made their way to the Barrow Downs, where, as foreseen, they ran headfirst into the evil wraiths who were the Barrow-wights. Although their origins were shrouded in mystery, we know that the undead spirits were sent to the Barrow Downs by the Witch King of Angmar. The monuments in this area were the tombs of the Edain, and it was said that the Barrow-wights were sent to haunt them. During the quest for the One Ring, Frodo and the other halflings were stuck in the Barrow Downs and nearly killed by the wraiths. However, it looked like the TV show was taking more creative liberties by making it seem as though Sauron awakened the Barrow-wights on his journey to Eregion. It was revealed that the messengers sent from Lindon in the second episode were indeed killed by these Barrow-wights, who had chains as weapons in the show. Another instance of Galadriel's foresight was a vision she witnessed of Eregion's impending siege. We saw the orcs ransack and desecrate Feanor's statue just as his grandson Celebrimbor was brought to his knees, a foreshadowing of his fate yet to come, like his morally complex grandfather. Elrond's company were noticed by a pack of orcs on their march to Eregion as their cartographer was pierced by a black arrow. Now, this was the moment the show took a leap and portrayed Galadriel's ring imbuing her with magical healing abilities, which seemed quite far-fetched. Anyway, she insisted that Elrond take Nenya and get out of there while she faced the remaining orcs. What looked like a valiant sacrifice for others was seen as a desperate attempt to save her ring in Elrond's eyes.
You should not be working. Eat earth.
The eldest being in all of Middle-earth. We finally got it, folks. Tom Bombadil made his on-screen debut in this episode. It all started when the stranger, in search of his halfling friends, came across a goat, which led him to the most peculiar fellow in the middle of the Runic desert. Even so, he wasn't as jolly as we expected him to be like he was in the books. Murmuring his jovial songs under his breath, Bombadil hardly paid the stranger any mind, who soon got swallowed up by a Huorn named Old Man Ironwood. What followed was an exciting moment for book fans as Bombadil coaxed the tree to free the stranger by saying, "You should not be waking. Eat earth, dig deep, drink water, go to sleep," which was picked directly from the book, from the instance when Merry and Pippin were trapped by Old Man Willow in the Great Forest by the Withywindle. These lines were also said by Treebeard in the extended edition of Peter Jackson's Two Towers, where Merry and Pippin were yet again trapped by a Huorn. Now, Tom Bombadil's interactions with the stranger are very reminiscent of the way he speaks to Frodo in the Fellowship of the Ring book. Tom insinuated that it was up to the Istar to fight against Sauron's growing darkness. This moment turned the "is the stranger actually Gandalf" debate, but it truly wouldn't make sense book-wise, as Tolkien clearly stated that Gandalf never visited the East. But oh well, moving on. The stranger also heard a woman named Goldberry singing along with Tom. Of course, this was a reference to Tom's beautiful wife, Goldberry, who is also known as Daughter of the River. As we know, Tom Bombadil has always been a fan favourite from the books. He was said to have existed before the stars did. This put into perspective how ancient he truly was, as the lighting of the stars also marked the awakening of the first elves. We want to know how Bombadil managed to remain so cheerful and sing-songy through the ages for someone who's essentially a primordial being? In the book, his name in Sindarin is translated to Irwain ben Adar, which means oldest and fatherless, but he hardly concerned himself with worldly affairs, keeping to himself in his country, which included the areas of the Old Forest and the Barrow Downs. This was where he rescued Frodo and his companions from. Their stay with Bombadil was a restful one, with plenty of song, drink, and grub. Tom even put on the One Ring, but seemed impervious to its effects. We're curious to see where Rings of Power takes his character further. It was a bit strange to see him all the way out in the eastern deserts, away from his country. What do you think drove him away?
Have you come back here to lead us all to the Suzat?
Beginnings of the Suzat. Speaking of the stranger's half-foot friends, Noddy and Poppy found themselves face-to-face with a strange halfling of the East named Merrimack. He led the two lost half-foots to his village of the Stores. In Tolkien's lore, the Stores were known as one breed of hobbits out of all three of them, but the only ones who could grow facial hair. They continued living south of the Anduin, even after the half-foots had begun their migration into the west. We're talking about the Hobbit Wandering Days, which also looks like the general direction the show might take, with all the screen time the halflings have been getting so far. So, Noddy and Poppy were taken to the Store village, where they were mind-blown to see halflings living in holes carved into the ravine and earth. Not nasty, dirty ones, mind you, but those which were dry, bare, and sandy. Although in Tolkien's writings, it was the half-foots who came up with the concept of smiles, aka hobbit holes, made from burrowing into the earth. Unfortunately for Nori and Poppy, they were mistaken to be the Dark Wizard's allies, while they actually referred to the stranger as their wizard friend. But upon mentioning Old Sadok Burrows, the matriarch of the Stores revealed an exciting truth. You see, Old Sadok's ancestor, Rorimas Burrows, was different from the rest. He dreamed of an idyllic, fruitful land with endless streams and rolling green hills. He dreamed of the Suzat, set off in search with a band of followers. These came to be the Harfoots, who, instead of settling down, never stopped wandering. You know what he dreamt of, what we know as the Shire. Nori seemed hurt about the fact that her people didn't have a solid home like they were meant to, the very thing they set out in search of. So, over the remaining episodes and seasons of the show, we might get the Halflings' journey toward the Shire, settling down by the inlands once and for all.
Winter Bloom nourished many of those trees from seed and sprout. Do not ask her.
A weeping Winter Bloom. Finally, we come to a grief-stricken Arondir and Isildur in desperate search of Theo, who seems to have vanished into thin air. While crossing a bogland near Fangorn Forest, both of them were swallowed by a worm-like beast. This was named as one of the Nameless Things. According to Gandalf, far below the deepest delving of the dwarves, the world is gnawed by nameless things. Even Sauron knows them not. They are older than he. Now I have walked there, but I will bring no report darken the light of day. So basically, they were primordial beasts that even the Balrog, Durin's bane, wished to get far, far away from. During Gandalf's endless fight with the Balrog, he travelled the channel of tunnels dug out by these creatures. So to see them so close to the ground, even overground in this episode, was a weird sight to see. That's not all. We also got to see a deer Entwife. A furious tree host named Winterbloom was going around killing wild men who felled trees for their own benefit. Wild men, along with merciless orcs, had left a blazing trail of stumps who were once Ents she'd raised. Now, one of the Valar, who was known as the Queen of the Earth, Yavanna, didn't mindlessly disapprove of felling trees, as it was a known fact that the inhabitants of Arda needed wood to create homes, ships, and anything else. But men and elves weren't meant to get greedy with felling trees, as it'd slowly destroy the forests which breathed life into the lands. Clearly, Saruman failed this requirement. Entwives were ancient tree mates, different from their male Ents, as they desired growing things to obey them. It was believed that Sauron burned most of the forests of the Entwives in his bid to slow down the last alliance of men and elves. In the episode, during a tender moment between Arondir and Winterbloom, the elf asks for forgiveness, saying that he's from Greenwood. Now, one would assume he was talking about Greenwood the Great, which came to be known as Mirkwood, also the forest east of the Anduin, but he was actually talking about Greenwood in Assyrian of eastern Beleriand, where he was from. Arondir was a green elf, part of the clan known as the Nandor. In the first stage, one of the elves from the Telerin clan undertook the great journey into the west and settled south of the Vales of the Anduin, but the fate of the Green Elves was barely known after the destruction of Beleriand. This reference also told us that Arondir has been around for quite a while, as he claimed to have seen the destruction of his homeland. Marvel's verdict, that's all for episode 4 so far. Gotta say, this episode was all over the place with multiple storylines going on at once, but it was endearing to see Tom Bombadil finally make an appearance, along with the Ents set out in vengeance. We're also glad we have some clarity on where the Hobbit storyline might end up. Stay tuned for next week's breakdown of episode 5, in which they'll hopefully get back to the dwarves of Khazad-dûm and Anatar, the Lord of the Rings. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.